Thanks, Randy. Next, we have Jessica Brooks, who will be providing an introduction to flood inundation mapping.
All right, so can you hear me, Allie?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. All right, so as Allie said, my name is Jessica Brooks. I am a hydrologist at Central Region Headquarters. Today, we just want to talk about flood inundation mapping a little bit. You may or may not have heard the National Weather Service is embarking on a multi-year rollout to operationally provide flood inundation mapping services across the United States. As this is a new service, and many folks across the field may not have a good understanding on it, understand how to use it, how we plan to provide it, or many other things. We wanted to take the opportunity to provide you with a little introduction, so you may have a little familiarity on what we'll be seeing and being involved in over the coming years. So what is flood inundation mapping? Maps, they're essentially maps that show the spatial extent, sometimes the depth of flooding at a specific water level or specific flow along a section of a stream. One thing I also want to point out here is the acronym FIM. You may or may not have heard people use the term FIM before, but you'll be hearing this a lot from me today and a lot in the coming years. So I want to make sure you know when you hear FIM, it's regards to flood inundation mapping. So why do we care about flood inundation mapping? Well, it's a way to visualize areas that may be inundated by floodwaters. So our hydrographs are great. They tell us what the river and height are expected to be, what the flow is expected to be. Our partners love them, but visualizing what the flooding actually looks like is difficult. So FIM is a technique that is giving us a way to increase our capability of messaging the potential flooding hazard to our partners and lets them really see what does the flooding look like. You know, any of you that have been involved in floods in the past have probably been asked some of these questions. I'm not going to go through all of them here, but these are some questions that were provided at a IDSS workshop at the National Water Center last fall, of things that they're asked when they're providing IDSS. You know, where is it going to flood? Is this particular building going to flood? Is my neighborhood going to flood? Can we get a map of what it looks like? So these are things that we're being asked to provide to our partners all the time. So really our goal is a way to improve how we communicate flooding. So putting water on the map, you see the hydrograph, you see the trace of what the river's done, what our forecast is, but what does that look like? So if we have an inundation map, we can provide that to our partners so they can see where is the water actually going to be, what does that look like? We do have our impact statements that I know our offices work really hard at providing, getting that information to have impact statements. But sometimes just reading the impact statements doesn't mean as much as actually seeing on a map and what that actually means. So how are we going to do this? So as I said, this is a multi-year rollout going through the end of fiscal year 2026. So this is the timeline that we're looking at. And this is where, when the National Weather Service is providing National Weather Service developed FIM publicly to the public and to our partners. So we are in fiscal year 2023, about halfway through. At this point, there is a group that is the first 10% of the US population that is being worked on to being implementing FIM. So they're working hard, they're doing lots of training, they're doing lots of starting to do some outreach as they are going to be providing FIM by the end of this fiscal year. Going to fiscal year 2024, an additional 20+% will be added to that. So we'll have up to 30% of the US population will be have FIM available and being provided by the National Weather Service. Then going on to the end of fiscal year 25, 60% of the population will be implemented. And then by the end of fiscal year 2026, the entire United States population will be provided with flood inundation mapping. So to show you, I mentioned the first 10%. This is a map of who those offices are that are in the first 10%. Notice there are none in Central Region, which is kind of why you haven't heard a lot about it so far. There's only several WFOs in there focused in Southern Region and Eastern Region. But again, these folks are the ones that are going to lead the effort. They're going through it. They're dealing with, you know, trials and tribulations of implementing this right now. Really, we'll be doing some things that, you know, we'll find out some lessons learned from this group as we move forward to the next 30 and 60 and 100% in the coming years. But again, these folks are putting a lot of time and effort into their training and working now into how are we going to be providing all this to our partners and giving them the best services we can. So again, these areas by the end of this fiscal year, we'll start to see publicly available FIM. The next 20%, so the FIM 30 or first 30% to be implemented by the end of fiscal year 24 will include portions of Central Region. So on this map, you see lots of colored CWAs. All the colored CWAs are CWAs that will be involved in the next implementation of FIM. So I have them listed there. Those of you that are listening today from those offices, you may have heard a little bit about it. There hasn't been a lot of discussion yet, but look for a lot of information to be coming here soon. So as I said, it's implemented by the end of fiscal year 24. That doesn't mean the work doesn't start till the end of fiscal year 24. A lot of things will be starting and moving ahead probably before fiscal year 24 even starts, especially in regards to training. So be on the lookout for some information coming in, how this is going to start going for those of you that will be involved in the FIM 30. And those of you that are not, we encourage you to kind of keep watch, see how this is going, pay attention, because you all will be involved at some point in the coming years. Now I want to touch a little bit on the different types of FIM. So FIM's not new. Inundation mapping has been developed by partners for many years, some of which that we at the National Weather Service have worked directly with partners, which have then published these maps on our AHAPS pages. However, the National Weather Service is now creating our own flavor of inundation maps using the National Water Model. And I do want to point out that although the National Weather Service is developing FIM, interagency work continues with our partners as we work with them on regional and national levels on integrating their FIM with our FIM and so on. So, so don't think that any of those projects have stopped or that our partners are not developing FIM still. They are. This is just in addition to what our partners have been doing in the past. So in speaking of the different flavors, FIMs are developed using different methods. So each type of FIM will have different capabilities and uses, and they just all should not be created equal. So part of using the FIM and part of the training that we'll all be involved in is knowing what methods are used to develop them and kind of what their strengths and weaknesses are. So going off of that, I wanted to list here the 3 FIM types that will be publicly available by the National Weather Service. So these are those areas in the FIM 10%. These are the types of FIM that they will be providing to their public and partners by the end of this fiscal year. So they start with the analysis version, which is mapping from current conditions. It doesn't have any forcings brought into it. And it's updated pretty frequently. Then we have the RFC 5-day FIM, which is flood inundation mapping that is provided for official RFC forecast points and downstream of there. So this FIM will use QPF that the RFCs use, and they'll also use the RFC forecasts into being used in the water model to provide the inundation areas. And then lastly, there is the National Water Model 5-day forecast. This one is the version that's available everywhere. It will be involved or available for every stream and reach across the country that the National Water Model models for. The forcings that are used in that are just plain model forcings. They're not quality controlled at all. It's just using straight QPF from the GFS mean. Eventually, it will be using NBM QPF, so that will be exciting when that gets there. But again, this one isn't quality controlled at all. It's just run and is available every 6 hours. So as I said, there's a lot to learn about this and figuring out how each one of these will be used, the best use of it to use for our National Weather Service mission. And as it rolls out, there will be training that'll help us learn and understand the details of each one. But again, when needing to understand that they're all aren't equal and aren't created equal and shouldn't be used equally. And this is just a quick little visual to kind of understand the availability versus the confidence level maybe in what these different FIMs provide. So on the top of your upside down triangle is your National Water Model FIM, which is the one that's available everywhere. It's available lots of places, but it has more approximations in it, so it is a lower confidence model. And then as you go down in the upside down triangle, you get through the RFC FIM, which is using more detailed inputs. So it has a little better confidence than the National Water Model FIM, but maybe not as much as, say, detailed FIM, which on the bottom of that is our FIM library that we have on AHEPS that has had a lot of time and effort and work done to quality control those maps. Those are the most accurate maps and preferred where available, but they are only available in limited locations. So you have to kind of have a little bit of give and take for each of these maps and just understand what they are and their availability when we're using these to provide IDSS. So then what else do we need to know? So expectations for WFO RFC staff as the FIMs rolled out, we really want to make sure you all know that you're not all expected to be experts in FIM, but will expect you to know how to interpret it and to answer questions that come from your partners and from the public, as the public again will be able to see these. So that's what the training will really get into to explain all this, and there will be kind of a tiered level of training from your subject matter experts down through your forecasters. And this will be implemented to all the field staff as the WFOs and RFCs become involved in the FIM rollout over the coming years. So then talking about the areas that will be implementing FIM. So what about the areas that will not be implemented yet? So the National Water Model FIM is currently being run everywhere in the lower 48 anyway, and it's available internally for anywhere. So any of your offices right now can see flood inundation mapping for your areas. So what does that mean? Right now, the FIM can be shared with core partners in your CWA, even if you are outside of the FIM 10 area, but that is on a case-by-case basis and would be limited to high impact events. So if you do have flooding in your area and there's interest of your office seeing it or getting some back and forth with the water center on it, or yeah, so if there's something you really want to share with your partners, we would ask that you work through the ROC, and they'll lead some coordination with the Water Prediction Operations Division down at the Water Center, and they'll work with you and to see if maybe the FIM is something that could be shared with your partners, or if it maybe isn't, and they can answer your questions as you're looking through that. We do want to make sure we throw out that it's understood that we are not trained up on this at this point in the field, and so we don't expect forecasters in all of our offices to have understanding on the FIM or understand the skills that we need to provide IDSS using FIM. So we really want to tell you all that if you do have a flood event, you want to use the FIM, we want you to lean on the National Water Center staff at WPOD to provide that expertise and information that you may need to give your core partners the best information we have and what we can provide them. So that was just one thing we wanted to make sure we brought up today, because just because you're not in the 10% doesn't mean that you completely are out of being able to see or use FIM here until your office gets to that point. And then lastly, just to tell you where you can access the FIM services. Again, you can access these services now in any office in Central Region. It's through the WaterView app, which is done by the Water Center. It's open to all employees, so there is a webinar that the Water Center had put together to kind of explain a little bit on how to use it. You can always reach out to Maren or myself if you're trying to get into WaterView and having some issues or anything, but we'd encourage you all to just get in there and poke around a little bit and see what you can. And again, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us or also to the staff at the National Water Center, and they'll help out as well. So with that, that's all I had for today. I do want to give a special thanks to Katie Landry-Guyden and Derek Giardino and Peggy Lee for a lot of the material in this presentation today. So with that, I can take any questions.
Thanks, Jessica. Waiting to see if anyone is raising their hand or has a question in the chat. One question I had is, since our partners do utilize, or some of our partners also do flood inundation mapping, do you think the training will include an introduction to what our partners are doing, so we're just aware of all the different FIMs outside of Weather Service as well?
I think we touch on that at some point, yes. If not, there has been actually some, there was a OCLO webinar done last year, I think, by Katie Landry-Guyden, talking about the different types of FIM that are available from the National Water Model FIM to all the different FIMs that are available from our partners. Because yeah, like I said, they're all different and they all have their own advantages and disadvantages to them. So yeah, understanding what they are, because they're very well maybe times that, you know, that they have different models available that we can use that may be better for a certain instance. So that's something that we continue to work with our core partners on how, again, we're going to integrate all of our different inundation mapping together and work together to provide the best services to the public and to all of our collective partners. So at some point that will be touched on. A lot of the training that we'll be getting regarding the FIM implementation will be really on National Weather Service FIM, but that will be what our partners are doing too, will get touched on. And it's always encouraged to ask if there's ever questions on how we should be using it. We're very happy to discuss it, or we'll work with the Water Center to talk about that too. So.
Thanks. And just one other question. How are they expanding the areas that will have FIM?
That is a process, I guess, that's really being led by the National Water Center. They're looking at population. Again, it's the percentages are by population, not by area. So I'm not even sure what all the metrics are offhand. I know there's like a list of like 5 or 6 things that they looked at when they were working to see what areas were going to be in the next grouping. Going from the 10% to the 30%, I can go back to that slide here quick. You see it kind of like expand, like reached across and merged the 2 areas that had been that are in the 10%. So just kind of connecting them. I'm not sure, the 60% has not been determined yet, but as we get into a lot of more rural areas, you could see, I'm sure you could see a lot more expansive expansion as the population, because going from 30% of the population to 60% of the population is going to include a lot of areas. So I'm not sure where that's going to go next, if it'll go south, east. I would assume that there will be more of Central Region involved in the 60%, but I can't say at this time where that's going to be.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Not seeing any other questions or hands raised. So thank you, Jessica, for presenting.